a sentry on a dolomite rock. In the heart of Carinthia, the southernmost province of Austria, where mountain landscapes gradually merge into the vastness of the valley, stands a true symbol of medieval steadfastness, Hochosterwitz Castle. Its towers, like eternal sentinels, have been vigilantly watching the surrounding lands for centuries, proudly rising above the horizon at a height of 160 meters. Thanks to its majestic architecture, on clear sunny days, the silhouette of the castle can be seen even from a distance of 30 kilometers, which Maiden makes it an undeniable landmark for every traveler. The fortress is majestically spread out on the top of a steep dolomite cliff, located east of the city of Sankt Veit and Der Glan. This is not just a fortification, it is a complex engineering organism that grew out of the mountain itself, becoming a continuation of the natural landscape. From Slavic princes to royal power, the history of Hochosterwitz goes back centuries, much further than one might imagine looking at its stone walls. The first documentary evidence of this object is found in the deed of gift of King Louis II, known as Louis the German. Dated in 860, this official document testified to the transfer of ownership of certain lands to the Diocese of Salzburg. Among the list of these possessions was the Hochsterwitz estate. However, the origins of this stronghold are even older. The name itself, known at that time as Osterwitz, dates back to the era when the Slavic Principality of Carinthia flourished in these territories. This place has long had strategic importance, being a natural center of power in the region. In the pivotal 11th century for history, the castle became an important player in the great game of that time. The Carinthian Duke Engelbert Spangheim, known for his unwavering support of Archbishop Gebhard during the fierce struggle for the investiture, a conflict between secular and ecclesiastical power, gained immense favor from the churchmen. For his faithful service, the Duke was appointed vicar, and as a reward he received several church estates at his disposal, among which the most precious pearl was Hochosterwitz Castle. Thus began the era of its heyday as one of the most impregnable bastions of Carinthia. An impregnable rock, the era of the von Osterwitz. In 1209, the history of the castle took a new turn. Duke Bernhard Spangheim gave this strategic estate to his trusted cupbearer. This event gave rise to a new noble family which went down in history under the surname von Osterwitz, forever merging with the name of its fortress. Under their leadership, the castle turned into a real engineering phenomenon of its time. The owners understood that height is only half the success, so they took radical steps. The rocky slopes around the castle were additionally hewn by craftsmen to turn them into steep vertical cliffs. Any attempt to climb up was suicidal for the enemy army. This impregnability became legendary in 1360. Then the Tyrolean Countess Margaretha Maltas, a woman of iron will, entered into open conflict with the Habsburgs for the Carinthian inheritance. Her ambitions were enormous, but the teeth of her army broke against the walls of Hochsterwitz. The siege, which should have been a triumph, turned into a shameful defeat. The unconquered castle became the main stumbling block, because of which Margaretha was finally forced to abandon her claims to the lands of the duchy. The shadows of Turkish raids and the rebirth under the sign of the Habsburgs. However, time is inexorable, and in May 1478 a tragic page closed the history of the von Osterwitz family. The last representative of this dynasty died in enemy captivity after another devastating invasion of the Turks. Deprived of its owners, the castle found itself under the rule of Emperor Frederick III of Habsburg. The most difficult times came for the fortress. Carinthia became a real shield of Europe, which time after time took on the blows of Turkish raids. Hochsterwitz held out, proving again and again its ability to resist the impassable, but the price was high. The walls were torn apart by battles, and its former greatness faded under the ruins. Salvation came at the beginning of the 16th century. Emperor Maximilian I, realizing the strategic importance of this point, placed the castle at the disposal of Matthias Lang von Wellenberg. This figure was symbolic. The future bishop of the city of Gurk and influential cardinal of Cartagena had not only ecclesiastical authority, but also an extraordinary understanding of fortification matters. Under his patronage, large-scale restoration work was carried out in the castle. Hochosterwitz was not just renovated, it was rethought and strengthened, preparing for new challenges of history that were soon to change its fate forever. The age of the Kevenghüllers, the birth of the Fortress-Labyrinth. In 1541, Emperor Ferdinand I made a strategic decision that forever changed the fate of Hochosterwitz. He gave the castle to his governor in Carinthia, Christoph Kevenghüller von Eichelberg. This warrior, who gained fame during the bloody wars with the Ottoman Empire, became the first in a long line of owners from the Kevenghüller family. The history of this family is impressive. Their descendants treat their heritage with such incredible awe that they take care of the castle to this day, preserving it as a living memory of their ancestors. Christoph Kevenghüller did not waste time on trifles. He began a large-scale reconstruction, striving to make the fortress invulnerable to modern weapons. To realize his plans, he invited Domenico Dell'Alio, one of the most outstanding military architects of that era, whose vision transformed the old castle into a first-class example of fortification art. Georg Kevenghüller, genius of the defensive art. After Christoph's death, the inheritance passed to his son Johann. However, Johann, being a diplomat at the Spanish court, spent most of his life far from his homeland. The castle was transferred to the supervision of his cousin, Georg Kevenghüller. This man turned out to be a real visionary. In 1571, Georg finally bought the rights to Hochosterwitz from Archduke Charles II, becoming the full owner, and it was from that moment that the castle began to acquire its unique appearance, which amazes the world even today. Georg did not just rebuild the walls, he invested his own money in creating a system that still causes admiration among professional fortifiers. His main ingenious solution was the famous 14 gates. It was not just a road to the castle gates, but a well-thought-out engineering trap. Each layer of defense had its own unique defense mechanism, forcing the enemy to go through real hell before he could approach the main gate. During the same period, the castle's living quarters were significantly expanded and added to, transforming the austere fortress into a livable residence. The defensive walls were supplemented with bastions and loopholes capable of withstanding intense shelling. Georg Kevenghüller proved that defense can be not only effective, but also incredibly sophisticated, creating an architectural masterpiece that even after 400 years seems impregnable. The 14-gate system, a trap for uninvited guests. When Georg Kevenghüller designed the climb to Hochsterwitz, he wasn't just building a road, he was creating a consistent filter for the enemy army. The path to the castle is a narrow, winding serpentine road that winds up the cliff, and there are 14 gates on it. Each gate is a separate fortification unit, an autonomous combat point, which was designed to delay the enemy, disorient him, and subject him to devastating fire from all sides. Constant control. How did this system work? The narrowness of the path did not allow the enemy to deploy a battle formation. The army turned into a thin line stretching along the cliff. They had no room to maneuver, and most importantly, their flanks were completely open to fire from the high walls of the castle which overhung the road. Each of the 14 gates was fortified with powerful wooden and iron doors. But this was only the beginning. Behind each gate, surprises awaited the so-called killing fields. Behind some gates, narrow courtyard traps were provided, where the enemy entered in the hope that the path was free and immediately found himself locked. Stones, hot tar, and a hail of arrows flew at them from above. At key points, the path could be interrupted by drawbridges and moats, and the enemy standing in a narrow passage became an ideal target. As soon as the enemy broke through one gate, he was not in the castle. He found himself in front of the next ones, which were even more fortified than the previous ones. Each subsequent tier was higher, which gave the defenders a huge advantage in height. The soldiers defending the castle could retreat upwards, passing fire to their comrades in the following positions. Georg Kevenghüller calculated everything so that not a single meter of the road remained a dead zone. The walls of the bastions were designed at such an angle that archers and crossbowmen could fire at the enemy even when he was already close to the gate. In addition to its purely military effectiveness, this system had a devastating psychological effect. When the enemy overcame the first, second, and third gates, losing hundreds of men, he saw 11 more obstacles ahead. This was exhausting not only physically but also morally. An army that passed through this corridor of death, reaching the last gate, usually lost all fighting spirit. Today, these gates, which were once a symbol of inevitable death, have become a major tourist route. But even now, climbing this road, you feel the same engineering logic that turned the rock into an impregnable bastion capable of stopping anyone. Myths and legends of the Corridor of Death, the legend of the Shadowhunter. Local legends say that the Hochsterwitz gate system had its own protector who was called the Shadowhunter. It was believed that during a siege, not only a soldier hid in each gate, but also a master spy who knew every crack in the walls. The myth says that these people could move inside the walls through hidden passages. When the enemy broke through another gate and found himself trapped, the hunter extinguished all the torches, and the invaders found themselves in complete darkness. The panic in the enemy ranks was so strong that they began to fight each other, mistaking their own for enemies. The myth of the Iron Maiden of the 13th Gate. There is a dark myth that the 13th Gate was special. In front of it, a figure resembling a knight in armor supposedly stood. They say that it was a mechanical guard, an invention of craftsmen who worked for the Kevenghüllers. If an enemy approached them without a special password, a lever would be activated, and the knight would release a hidden iron chain that blocked the way, and hot sand would begin to pour from the holes above his head. Although it sounds like a fairy tale, historians confirm that the architecture of the gate does indeed have strange niches for complex mechanisms, the purpose of which is still not solved. Actual confirmation, the trap of inevitability. Historians confirm that Georg Kevenghüller was so obsessed with security that he personally checked every gate. He conducted so-called training sieges where his own soldiers tried to break through the gates dressed in enemy armor. If someone managed to get through too quickly, Georg ordered the entrance to be redone, narrowing it even more. This made the castle not only an engineering project, but also the fruit of constant endurance testing. The legend of the last chance. The myth says that the 14th gate closest to the castle was never closed to its own. They say that they had a magic lock that recognized the steps of the faithful servants of the Kevenghüller family. When the enemy approached the gate, they became heavier than a mountain, and when the master approached, they opened without touching. This is, of course, just a fairy tale, but for that time it was an incredible example of how effectively the lifting mechanisms controlled from the tower worked. The legend of the Black Princess. Although we mentioned Countess Margaret of Maltaz as an enemy of the castle, local folklore has made her the main ghost of these rocks. According to legend, she was so enraged by her defeat at the walls of Hochosterwitz that she made a pact with the dark forces to find a way to take revenge. It is said that on moonless nights, the ghost of Margaret appears at the 14th gate, trying to open it with her cold touch. Those who have seen her claim that she still holds the keys to the castle, which have long since disappeared from the real world. About the Kevenghüller personal army. In the 16th century, Georg Kevenghüller created something unusual. He had his own army of armed peasants who lived in the villages below the castle, but had their own sets of armor at each of the 14 gates. The myth says that in the event of an attack, they would change clothes so quickly that it seemed to the enemies that the castle was not defended by people, but by spirits materializing from stone. This fueled rumors that the castle was impossible to take because it was guarded by living statues. The myth of the underground passage to the Earth's core. The old inhabitants of Carinthia believe that under the foundation of the castle, there is a tunnel that goes vertically down into the bowels of the mountain. Legend has it that this tunnel was not created by people, but by ancient mountain spirits who are loyal to the Kevenghüller family. Allegedly, through this passage, the castle receives energy from the Earth's core, which allows it to stand so steadfast for centuries, despite wars and earthquakes. This is excellent material for reflection on why the castle has never been completely destroyed. The legend of the silent bell. The castle has an old bell tower where a bell hangs, which, as they say, has not rung since the last Turkish invasion. According to legend, it fell silent because it heard the last breath of one of the defenders and promised not to ring until blood was shed in the castle again. To this day, the bell remains silent. Locals believe that if it ever rings on its own, it will be a sign of great changes for all of Austria. Factual detail: a hiding place in the wall. During a 19th century restoration, a niche was found in one of the thick walls of the 8th gate, in which lay a set of 16th century surgical instruments. Myth immediately attributed them to an alchemist doctor who supposedly treated soldiers using magic potions. This find gave life to the legends of Georg Kevenghüller's secret laboratory, although the reality is more prosaic. Most likely, the instruments belonged to a military paramedic. The legend of the Kevenghüller treasure. Rumor has it that before one of the particularly dangerous sieges, Georg Kevenghüller hid the family treasury not in the cellars, but in a specially prepared so-called false bastion which he planned to blow up if the enemy broke through. Legend has it that this treasure still lies in a cavity in one of the rocks under the castle, and is protected not only by the stone but also by a spell of silence. And anyone who searches for gold for selfish purposes loses the ability to hear the sounds of the world until he leaves the borders of Carinthia. About the window to the future. There is a small window in the main tower called the window to the future. According to old legends, whoever looks into it at exactly noon on the summer solstice will see not the mountains, but their own reflection, but not as it is now, but in many years. Locals believe that this window was designed so that the owners of the castle could assess whether they were worthy of their inheritance in the eyes of descendants. A stone that has overcome time. Hochosterwitz Castle is not just a fortification carved into the dolomites. It is a story frozen in time about how human ingenuity inevitably triumphs. Each of the 14 gates, each ledge of the rock, and each stone laid back in the days of Carinthia whisper to us that true security is not only the thickness of the walls, but also the clarity of the mind. When you stand on the top, looking at the endless expanses of Carinthia, there is a strange feeling that the castle does not just stand on a mountain, it seems to control the rhythm of this land. It saw the arrival of Slavic princes, repelled Turkish invasions, and survived the heyday of great empires. While kingdoms fell apart and the names of states changed, Hochsterwitz remained unchanged, continuing to serve its masters. This place teaches us that even the most difficult path, the path through 14 gates of mortal danger, can be passed if you have a clear plan and cold calculation. Today, when the world around us is becoming as fragile as the walls of medieval fortresses, Hochsterwitz reminds us that the real masterpiece is not the one that conquered the world by force, but the one that managed to maintain its integrity, standing in the face of history. Perhaps that is why the Kevenghüller family still holds this castle in their hands. After all, in our fleeting world, where everything depreciates in a matter of years, there are things that cannot be bought or destroyed, a memory carved in stone and loyalty to a place that has become a true home for several generations, higher than the sky. Thanks for watching, my friend. Don't forget to watch our other videos and learn new mysteries. We have a lot more interesting things in store for you. Leave your questions and wishes in the comments. What should we tell you about next time?